Honourable Member for Indi.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker and colleagues. The Border Morning Mail, my local paper, story on Tuesday, November the 16th. Remember when gay meant happy? Well, that was yesterday. Full page, rainbow colours. Elation as gay couples finally feel acceptance. And I quote, "The people of Border and North East have spoken along with the majority of Australians demanding marriage equality, with 63.1% of Indi electorate voting yes in the same-sex plebiscite. Voting in the North East was higher than the national average of yes votes of 61.6%. In Farrer, my neighbour electorate, it was lower, but still a majority of 55.2%. The Border LGBTI community gathered in Wodonga for the result, with most describing it as a sense of relief. Colleagues, today in this House I join my voice with those in the Senate, the Attorney-General and others, that there is no place for discrimination in my country. And in my speech today, I'd like to focus particularly on young people in my electorate and the role they have played in the Indi vote. And I'd like to share with you some of the lessons learned. I'd also like to make a small note about organised religions and the role they've played, and I'd like to finish with some personal observations of this campaign. But to start with the young people in my electorate of Indi, a huge call-out and thank you. And I'd particularly like to reference Georgina Ridley, who in April 2013, when I first put my hand up to stand as a member for Indi, she organised to have a meeting with me in her Year 12 year and said, "Cathy, we will support you and my friends, but first, what's your opinion about marriage equality?" And I was stumped. Of all the things that we could be talking about, why was this important? But Georgina was persistent. She said, "Cathy, this is really important to us." So I said, "Of course I support marriage equality." And I think in those words I really didn't understand what I was opening myself up for. But Georgina and her friends then got organised. And I have to say the reason why I'm in this parliament today is because the young people of North East Victoria organised. They wanted a member of parliament who would stand up in this place today and vote yes. Now, sure, there were other issues, but that was the defining one. So Georgina and her friends made videos, they did social networking, and I have to say they became politicised. And the wonderful thing is the politicisation of the young people in North East Victoria doesn't mean they all support me, but it does mean they pay attention to politics and they pay enormous attention to what this House does and says. So my yes vote is particularly for the young people of North East Victoria. And I hope that you take great courage in what you have done and you apply that equal energy and enthusiasm to climate change, to our environment and to making sure that this country becomes and reaches its potential to be fair and equitable to everybody. And in acknowledging the young people, I'd also like to bring to the attention of the House the work of the Victorian Government and particularly Ro Allen as the Equal Opportunity Commissioner, and the terrific work that she did with the Rural and Regional LGBTI Roadshow, and to thank her for particularly supporting, and the Victorian Government, to supporting and encouraging and being proactive to the young LGBTI community of Victoria as this survey took place. Ro, I acknowledge you and thank you for your work, and I love the work that you do. The next group of people I'd like to briefly address in my presentation today is the Anglican Church in Wangaratta. And Deputy Speaker, I request leave to table a letter from the Bishop of Wangaratta, and I'd like to speak briefly to it.
Is leave granted?
Thank you. So the letter is written on the 15th of November and it's signed by the Right Reverend John Parkes AM, Bishop of Wangaratta, and I need to say Anglican Bishop. And in his letter to me, he has great wisdom. He encourages me to vote yes. And he's saying of his church, and I'd particularly like to bring this to the debate, he says of the Anglican Church, "It is fair to say that we have not always undertaken the task of sensitive listening well across our church. On occasions we have been more ready to talk to, or perhaps at, rather than listen to those, our brothers and sisters. And some of our language has been less kind, less respectful and less dignified. And words have power, and wrongly chosen words can do damage. And in referring to organised religion and its role it's played in this debate, I want to put out a call of recognition, particularly to the churches in my electorate. We have had disagreement on this topic, but that doesn't mean we don't bring to bear that fundamental Christian tenet of love your neighbour as yourself. And I think we've got a lot of work to do in our community of how we can actually enact that in all ways, shapes and forms. And I'd like to think that we could let the argument end and we can move on to a place of choosing our words carefully and actually listening to and with each other as we make our community, particularly in North East Victoria, one when that gospel message of thy kingdom come actually exists in our community and where we do love each other as the call of Christ is for us. And we have some work to do there, I think. But the next part of my talk, I'd briefly like to talk about my personal experience in this campaign. And like many others in the House, this is a lovely opportunity to be able to talk about what I've learned. And in referencing my personal experience, I want to talk about the journey I've been on from when Georgina first asked me as a politician would I vote for marriage equality, to the personal growth that's happened to me as I've had to change many of my fundamental precepts. Because it's not just about marriage equality. It's actually about gender and how we express gender in our community. Now, I've always been a feminist, and I've always, since I was 12, I think, discovered that my brothers and my sisters perhaps got treated differently and that the men in my family behaved differently to the women. And I've always struggled with what was it about me being a woman that made me different? Why couldn't I just be accepted without a gender attached? And it was a huge fight in my growing up not to be seen as a girl or a lady. I wanted to be seen as myself and be able to make my way in the world. And as I got older and the wisdom of other people in my life, I've come to understand that being a woman is my competitive advantage and work with it. But the idea of defining someone by their gender still irks me. I don't like it when people say boys and girls or men and women. I really want to be accepted for myself. So you can totally understand when young people in my family, and here I want to say how much I appreciate my young nieces and nephews. And just let me point out the sexism of that word, nieces and nephews. Where's the non-gendered description for children of your sisters and brothers? There's not one. There's cousins, which is non-gendered. But anyhow, to the nieces and nephews of my family, to thank you for your patience and tolerance as you've taught this old aunt a great deal. So here's what I want to say to the House. One of the big things that my young people have taught me as this debate has gone on, that there's such a thing as gender fluidity. It's a spectrum. And there are some people who are clearly male, female attached. There are other people in our community who are clearly female, female, male, male attached. And there's other groups of people who are much more fluid. And as I've gone on this journey, and the young people, not only in my family, but the gender identity group in Wodonga and the other young people who have taken me into their confidence, I've come to understand how complex this is to manage gender fluidity. And I want to put on the record that I have learnt a lot, and I'd like to share a few of those learnings with the House today, because it's not only about marriage equality, it's about how we in our lives move to accept people whose gender definition is different from ours. So the little bit of learning I'd like to share with my colleagues today is about pronouns. As this program was going on, some of the young people in Wodonga and some of my nieces and nephews says, "Cathy, you really need to understand about pronouns." And I said, "What is it about pronouns?" And they said, "Well, you know, you talk about he or she." I go, "Yeah, well, he are men and she are women, but some of us don't fit those categories." And my poor old mind went into overspin. or how could you not be he or she? And they took me through a journey so that today I can stand in this place and say, I get pronouns. And now I'm much more tactful, I hope, and say to people who are gender non-defined, tell me your preferred pronoun. How would you like me to refer to you, as opposed to making the assumption that you're male or female? And when they share with me their preferred pronoun, letting me know that they might be transgender, genderqueer or gender fluid, they are giving me an opportunity of trust. So some people use a gender pronoun that identifies them as he or she. Some people use gender-neutral pronouns that don't identify them as male or female, they or e, that's ze or ey. Some people change their pronouns, and it's a bit like our names. If you get married, you change your name. So some people change the use of their pronouns. And this can cause enormous resistance. People like myself say, but you're either or, whereas in fact they're saying, no, we're not polarised. And why is this important, and why do I bother to bring it to the House when we're talking about marriage equality? Because for me, this legislation is not only about same-sex, it's about two people, however they define themselves. And my learning as I've moved through this is it's not up to me to do the definitions, it's to respectfully ask the people I'm talking to. And where I got to in the end of this discussion, having been taken on this really important education program, was applying informal documents. And now I'm super-duper conscious when it says male or female, and now I look for other, because I understand that there are a significant number of people in my community, and not necessarily young, for whom other is the appropriate box to tick. So, in bringing my comments to a close, I want to say that for me, how important this discussion has been as one of listening and understanding, and how grateful I am that I have had the opportunity to go to most of the churches and the elder groups in my community and listen to them and to their objections to this legislation. And I say, I am with you. I will work with you to create in our communities love, understanding and tolerance. But I also will stand in this parliament and argue as long as I can for equality and for people to be accepted and treated as they need to be. And I think we've made a first really good stance today on marriage equality, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the debate when all the LGBTIQ community know that they are accepted, they can choose the pronouns that they want, and that they will be welcomed into our community, not as they, not as other, but as us. So to Ivy, to Fleet, to Maggie, to Leah, to Eliza, to Ben, to Franny, to Fergus, to Max, to Mia, to Annika, to Sarah, to all my nieces and nephews, thank you for bringing me on this journey, and I commit to stay with you for the distance.
Question is that the amendment be agreed to, and I call the honourable member for Lyne.